Well, if you brought it on yourself.
Say that.
You got
All right.
that on already? That red light's on.
Looks like it's running. Well, there's a little bit of dead time at the beginning of each tape. I guess for the benefit of the listeners, this is Russ Harris live, part 2.
Well, almost. Living, maybe, but
The 29th
The 29th of March. We're about 2
of
weeks late.
2003.
Is it 2 weeks later from the first one?
More or less.
We thought of a bunch more stories and certain events from the war that need to be retold, and so we thought we'd sit down again with Grandpa and have him share some of these things with us.
Tonight we will fight Japan all over again.
well, you should have been able to play the last part of the other one so I'd know where we left off. So I'm just not sure where we left off here.
We didn't do any of the war stories.
overlap here with some of these stories.
We'll remind you if you start to
Tell them
repeat
again
yourself.
or whatever.
Then we can be sure you told the truth.
Most of them are new to me, so if we start getting ones that I've heard before, I'll let you know. But before we get on to that, we wanted to hear the story about you, about them determining the different kinds of milk in school. I heard that.
Oh, didn't I tell that one last week?
No.
Well, that puts me clear up into high school in my freshman year of high school. Joe Reed. Joe Reed was our agriculture teacher. And one of the things he did every year was to have the students
I'm gonna sit around here.
take one of the little sample bottles
Florence, I've heard these
at
stories.
home
When
and
it
get
gets time.
full of milk
Seven.
from one of their cows.
Well, tell it on the thing. Oh, you're
Now,
telling.
most of the students,
Sorry.
most of the students may only had 1 or 2 cows. Not many people had numerous cows to sell milk. Most of them just had cows for their own use. And so anyway, I took 2 of these little bottles. I sneaked out an extra one. And I took them home. And this was when Patty was just a tiny baby. Grandma Harris was nursing her. And so we had a Guernsey cow at that time. Usually we had Holstein cows, but at that time we had a Guernsey. And so I filled that little bottle of milk from the Guernsey cow. And then my mother would pump the milk and feed, so she could feed it to Patty with the bottle. So I went into the kitchen and filled the other little bottle up with Mother's milk. And we had a label on the side and we put our name on there, but on the one with Mother's milk, I didn't write anything on the label. So when I went back to school the next day, I sneaked those 2 bottles in there, and he just had us set them in a centrifuge that he had. And so push the button so the light will come on. Well, nobody on it. And so I set them in the centrifuge. And so he didn't, just looked and saw the ball in there. He says, everybody have them in here? Okay. So he had to start cranking the thing. And as you crank it, the spinning brings the cream to the top.
You actually had to crank the centrifuge.
That one you had to crank it.
Okay.
And so to spin it around. Now, they had electric ones later, I'm sure, or whatever, but that one we had in the class, you had to hand crank it. So anyway, when he got it cranked enough, then he starts taking the bottles out. Okay, now this was a Guernsey cow, because the butter fat's about 4.5, and then he'd say, now this is a Holstein because it's only 2.5. And well, hey, here's a Jersey because it's 6. And he says, and here's what is this one? He says, on and looking at it. And he says, whose is this? Because you forgot to put your name on it. Whose is it? He says, is this goat's milk or what is it? This is not cow milk. It's, well, I didn't say anything. And nobody else knew it. I'm the only one who knew I did it, so nobody else could say. They're wondering, okay, whose is it? And finally, he just put it aside. He said, I don't know what this is. I've never seen milk with this butterfat color and content. I've never seen that. So he just put it aside. And I never did tell him what it was or anything. We just let it go. But that was a little prank to pull on him.
One of the men.
He was a pilot in World War I, but he never ever discussed that with us at all. If anybody even asked him, he'd just say, well, that isn't what we're in here to learn. He would never even talk about it at all. But as an aviator in World War I.
Well, thank heavens you don't have the same problem.
Yeah. Well, and I don't know if he never got overseas. You know, very few of our pilots ever did actually get into combat. It was mostly English and French pilots that were doing that. And they never flew an American plane. No American-built plane ever was flown in combat in World War I. Our guys were flying in French planes, mostly. And our aces, Rickenbacker and some of those.
I don't think I'd want to fly in anything made by France.
Yeah, well, they didn't have any choice. They had the combat planes there and we didn't. So that's what they flew in. I don't know, probably some English planes too, but I think they're mostly French. Well, now back to
Are we gonna get the 2x4 story?
Or are we going right onto the war stories?
Well, it wasn't really a 2x4, it was two 2x4s actually.
Wow.
Roy belonged to a little band, a little hillbilly band, and he had, his instrument was a tub, a wash tub, and he turned it upside down and had a piece of, simply had baling wire is what it was, twisted onto the handle, one of the handles on the tub, and then it came up, and he had a broomstick, and the broomstick had a notch in the bottom, and he had the wire twisted on the broomstick so he could, the notch set in the upside down tub, set in the rim around the tub, so it held it in place. Now he could pull it tighter or looser, and it played like a bass fiddle, or whatever those things are that you. So anyway, that's what he played in the band, and he got pretty good at it. And you had another guy that played the piano, and you had another guy that played a trumpet, and so now they didn't play for dances that I know of, but they would play in assemblies and things like that. So anyway, we were cleaning up the backyard, and I had a boxing glove that I found in the junk, just one boxing glove. I didn't have the other one. I'd found it in the junk someplace, I don't remember where. And it was out there in the back on the milk separating table, and as we were cleaning all this stuff, why, he picks up this glove, and he knew I only had one, so he didn't think there was any sense in having it, so he just took it out and put it on the trash pile. So when I came around there, I took some junk out, and here's my glove out there on the trash pile. So I picked it up and I brought it back. And I put it back there where I wanted it. And so the next time I came out, it was gone again. So I'm taking this stuff, here it is at the trash pile again. Well, I told him to leave it alone, it was mine, and not to just knock it off or whatever I told him. But whatever I told him, he reached out and slapped my face, which wasn't uncommon because Roy was so much bigger than the rest of us. And he went on around the side of the house. So I took the board that he had designed to hold up the edge of his tub that he played, and it was two 2x4s with one 1-inch piece between, so that it was just there's a space in between. Just had these two pieces in between on each end, and the space in between. And then he had actually carved a little curve around there so that the tub set in that on the ground, and that slanted down then to the floor, the other side. So one edge was up off the floor about this far. And that let the sound out from the tub. And so I took that board and I put it out on the trash pile. Well, he hadn't slapped me then, but I put that on the trash pile. Well, he went out with some stuff, and here's his instrument board out there on the trash pile. So he brings it back in, and that's when he slapped my face for putting it out there. So then he went on to do something else. I took that board out there, and I took the axe, and I just chopped it all to pieces. It really broke it up. And so then he came back with some stuff, and here it is all broken up. And he picked it up. Now it was still kind of together, but pretty well broken. And he picked it up, and he said something about, that's when he slapped my face. And so I had a rake or something in my hand that I was working. And I swung it at him, and he held the board up this way. And it broke the rake handle right in two. The rake just went off here, and the other target I still had in my hand, and went right, just grazed his hand as it went by, the broken piece. And so I thought, well, it's time to get out of here. So I turned to run, and he threw this soundboard at me. Now, he was a baseball pitcher. He was pitched for the high school team and for the Mesa Merchants later. But this was when I was about 9 or 10, I guess, and he was 5 years older. And as I took off, he threw that thing at me, and it hit me right in the back of the head.
Oh.
Right here.
He's got the bump still.
And it knocked me unconscious. I remember just floating down to the ground. I don't know if you've ever been knocked out, but that's the feeling you get. You don't feel just a flop to the ground, which is what you're actually doing. It feels like you're going down slowly. And when you hit the ground, it doesn't hurt. It feels like you're just springing up and down on the ground. And there I was, and Tom came by, and he came around the corner about that time, and here I am laying there on the ground bleeding. Tom said to Roy, "You crazy fool, what'd you do that for?"
Ann and Ruby were all crying.
How did you know he said that? Because you were unconscious.
I could hear. I wasn't totally, that's the funny thing about it. I wasn't totally out. I could hear. I couldn't move or do anything, but I could hear what was going on. And then Joe yelled, "Ma, Roy just killed Russ." And I just laying there real still. So my mother comes out, and Dad wasn't there. I don't know, he was gone somewhere. And she comes out, she gets down there, and she's satisfied I'm alive because she can tell I'm breathing. And so she said to him, "Now take him around there and clean this up here. Clean him up." Just probably the only time I ever heard her talk in a harsh voice. And so he just picked me up for the body here and just let my feet drag. Right here. And I was just playing like I was dead. I just wasn't moving a muscle if I could help it. And he takes me around. They had a little patch of grass, about this big here. And he'd put me on it, and he gets the hose, and he's running it on the back of my head and washing this off. And when he gets it washed off, he goes in to get something to put on it. And then I jumped up as soon as he went in the house, and I ran around, and I took this soundboard of his, and I finished it off. I just beat it till it was just splinters. And then I came back and laid down on the lawn just like he left me. And so he came back, and he's working on it. And then I decided it's time to come to. So I kind of start stirring a little. And then like I'm waking up. So now he goes to do something, and he goes around there, and here's his board just in splinters. And he comes running back around there, And I don't know what he would have done to me, but Mother was standing there.
Why do you think you did it? It could have been Joe
And
or Tom.
she said, "You've done enough. Now just leave him alone. Just get away from him and leave him alone," to Roy. Well, he obeyed Mother. We never disobeyed our mother. So anyway, that was it. So nothing ever came of it after that. He made another one, built him another one of those, and that was it. But that was to my memory, that was probably the first time I'd ever been knocked unconscious. But again, I was never totally out. I knew what was going on.
Sounds
I
like a
just couldn't
concussion.
do anything about it.
Sounds like a concussion.
So did the boxing glove stay in the trash or not?
Well, the glove, I don't know what happened to the glove. It disappeared, and his board disappeared because he threw it away, I guess, but then he made another one. And I couldn't make another glove, so that was the end of that story. But Roy was so big, he was so much bigger than the three of us. Joe and Tom and I were about the same size. By the time I was 9 or 10 years old, we all wore the same size Levi's, same size shirts, everything. The three of us did. And then Roy, he was great big. The time he was 16 or 17, he weighed 180, 90 pounds, and 6'2", really big guy. Well, we were out working in the field one day. It wasn't probably not too distant from that time. And Dad was out there working with us, and Joe and Tom and Roy and I. And Roy got to cuffing us around and messing around with us. So we decided we'd add it, the three of us. So we just said, let's get him together. Yes, we can take him if we stick together. So I just made a lunge at him and grabbed him right around both his feet like I was tackling him. And as I did, Tom hit him and knocked him down on the ground. And Tom was on one arm and Joe was on the other, had him pinned on his back, and I'm still down there locked around his legs. So here we are, and it's probably a summer day. It's hot out there. And he says, "You better let me up." And we said, "We'll let you up when you promise to leave us alone. We're getting tired of you pounding on us one at a time. Now the three of us are going to hold you here till we get a promise that you're not going to be pounding on us anymore." Well, he said he wouldn't do it, wouldn't make any promise like that. Oh, well, okay, then we'll make it unpleasant for you here. So Tom picks up a couple of little claws, and he puts one right on each of his eyes. Well, Roy closed his eyes now he knows, Roy knows if he opens his eyes, the dirt's going to get in there. So there he is with his eyes shut on his back. He didn't dare open them, trying to move his head to shake them off. And so we just kept bugging him with stuff like that. We put them up on his mouth, so if he opened his mouth, the claw lay in his mouth. And my dad is standing over there really quite enjoying it, but not laughing or anything. And we were probably 30, 40 minutes. We had him pinned like that there on the ground where he really couldn't do anything. And finally he said, my dad said, "All right, you guys, this is enough. Get up and let's get the work done. You've fooled around long enough." And so Roy said, "Okay, I won't bother you anymore. Just let me up." And so when we let him up, then he sort of flexed his muscles, and we said, "Hey, if you hit one of us, we're going to take you down again, and we're going to tie you up while we have you down there and leave you. Just leave us alone." So we got along better after that. He wasn't quite so didn't bully us so much as he did before. Because now he knew that the three of us could take him.
Kind of like the mafia.
Anyway, what other stories do you want to hear about?
Well, you mentioned that you guys didn't dare disobey your mother. What would have happened if you'd have disobeyed her?
My dad, early on, I can remember, was probably 7 or 8 years old, when I don't, probably was Joe, said something really smart aleck to Mother. And I can remember my dad grabbing him by the scruff of the neck, and for the benefit of all of us, he said, "That better not ever happen again. If I ever hear you say anything rude or mean to your mother, you're going to wish you hadn't." And one of the things, you heard guys calling their mothers "my old lady." This was quite common, and "my old lady" did this. And some guys called their wives that "my old lady." My dad said, "If I ever hear one of you call your mother your old lady, you're really going to wish you had never done that." And so we just didn't do it, and it wasn't just out of fear either. It was that we realized how that was important and very rude to do that, and so we just never did that. But then my mother never gave us cause to talk bad to her, because she was really, for an 8th grade graduate, she was a remarkable woman. And I can remember how many times she helped me with my algebra, helped me with my biology, whatever high school classes I had. And I thought, this has got to be the smartest woman in the world, to have had no more education than that. And whatever I ask her, she helps me understand it. It was years later, probably I was 25 years old or more, I said, "You know, Mom, it used to just amaze me how whatever I ask you, you could help me with it." And she said, "Every time any one of you ask me a question about your studies, it just scared me to death, because I didn't know anything about those things." And I said, "Well, you must have known something about it. You always helped me." And she said, "And what did I do?" And I said, "You helped me." "No." And she says, "I came over and I said, now let's see, which problem is this you're on?" "Well, this one." "Okay, now read it out loud to me. What does it say you're supposed to do?" And so I'd go carefully what it's supposed to do. "All right, now why don't you do this first thing it says to do, and then we'll look at it again and we'll go from there." Well, so I did it, and I thought she helped me, but she didn't know she didn't even know what I was doing there. And but she said, "I just get knots in my stomach every time you children would ask me to help you with something, and I knew nothing at all about it." And I said, "Well, I always thought you did, because when you came over there, why, by the time you got through, I knew how to do it. And I thought you taught me." And she said, "No, you taught yourself." So that was and I don't know that I ever heard her yell at anybody. But one of the things that I did do that I always regretted was that one time she wouldn't let me do something that I wanted to do, and I was probably 8 or 9 years old. And I said to her, "I hate you." And without even batting an eye or anything, she just said to me, "Well, I feel sorry. I feel bad about that, because I really do love you. I really do. And I really feel bad that you don't love me, or that you hate me." I'll tell you, I walked out there and I felt about that. And I never ever said an unkind thing to her after that, because I just thought, what a dumb thing to say, you hate your mother. So that was a lesson I learned early on. And but the people, I still meet people over at the temple that, not many that worked with Mother, because they are dead now, but their daughters who were in young women's programs when my mother was president. And these women are up in their 80s now, but I run into one every once in a while, and they'll say, "Your mother was just the neatest lady. She was our teacher in the young women's program, and she just was so nice, so kind, so helpful, always so helpful to us. And she just knew how to do everything." And and I'll meet Mona, with her cloth green now, or there's a few others. And Mona will maybe have one time she had 3 of her granddaughters with her there. And Mona's almost blind now, so whenever she comes to the temples, one of her granddaughters at least is with her and has a hold of her arm. And Mona, I went in and I have to get up real close to her. And I say, Mona, it's Russ. And oh, she grabs my hand. Oh, Russell, she called me Russell, but I said Russ. Grabs my hands. And then she'll turn maybe to the granddaughters and she'll say, his mother was my leader when I was a gleaner girl. And I think they're Maya maids now at that age or whatever, that's the oldest of the girls.
Laurel.
Laurels
are the oldest.
Oh. And she'd say, she was the best teacher, just the nicest teacher you'd ever want to know. And she's telling her granddaughters this about my mother. But anyway, and she said, and when she was Relief Society president, Mona says, my mother was her counselor. And she said, what a leader. She just was such a neat lady. Well, my mother only had one dress-up dress. That's all she owned in the years we grew up. Now, she had work dresses. She never wore Levi's or pants, so that she always wore dresses, but she had just, plain dresses. But she only ever had one really nice dress at a time. When it'd wear out, she'd have another one. And here Mona's mother, they had a quarter section of land right down here at the corner of Baseline and Mesa Drive and Country Club, to the west of Country Club and south of north of Baseline, that south or northwest corner of that intersection. Had that old quarter section, and he raised lettuce. Husband raised lettuce down there, and there were times. Now we're talking Depression, when you'd be lucky if your income for the year, if you were a good carpenter, and you worked pretty steady through the year, you'd be lucky if you made $2,000 in a year's time, because the carpenter's wages were only 2 bits an hour, and I can remember when it went to 50 cents an hour. And here this guy would make $50,000 off of one lettuce crop. So they always had a new car, always had everything, financially everything. And here my mother, and Sister Millet, Aunt Hazel we called her, she always had a different nice dress on every time you saw her. She had on a different nice pretty dress. But that didn't make a bit of difference to her that my mother only had the one dress. And she just, according to Mona, she said, my mother would come home and tell us what a sweet lady your mother was and how happy she was to be working with her as a counselor. And Sister Lisenby was the other counselor, and her husband had a good job and made quite a bit of money. And so these people all had 2 cars. We only had 1 car and lived out there in the country. And if my dad had to go somewhere for a carpenter job, then one of those 2 ladies had to come down to the farm, get my mother to take her up to Relief Society, because it was held in the daytime, and take her back home again. They never minded that at all. They just thought that was a privilege. So you have a great grandma there that really I'll be looking forward to the time when you meet her, that is really a neat lady and knew how to work. Boy, she knew how to work. Whatever needed to be done, she was canning fruit. The house was immaculate. Somebody said you could eat off the floor any time in that house. And I said, well, once when Roy hit me, I was eating off the floor there for a little while, but so it was a good thing she kept it that clean. But she was an excellent housekeeper. She had 9 children. Orrin Fuller told me one time over at the temple, he said, when you kids came down to school, you had patches on your pants, but they were always clean. Said your mother never let you come to school. You had patches on your pants, but they were always clean. Said your mother never let you come to school. But what you were clean, and he said, the patches, well, who cared? The clothes were clean and the patches were put on there nicely. And so he said one time that over at the temple, he said to me, your mother was one of the greatest ladies I ever knew. And that's what Grandfather Harris said over in Los Angeles. After Grandma and Grandpa found him and spent time with him, and then they went on their mission in New Zealand, and Grandpa told us one time when we were there, your mother is the greatest lady I think I've ever known. He just really, and that's why we never worried about him joining the church, because Mother died, he died in '64 at about 87 years old, and my mother died in '66. So I knew that she would teach him the gospel when she got over to the other side.
What did she die of?
Cancer,
Of
colon
what?
cancer.
Colon cancer?
Same thing that Roy died of, same thing that Gladys died of, colon cancer,
What'd your dad die of?
prostate cancer. So, anyway, that,
What she after?
You've got a good heritage here.
So I was telling Ashley, all of Ashley's family has heart disease, so poor Andrew's either got heart disease or cancer, he's gonna get it.
He said one proctologist could make his career just on our family.
yeah, yeah, somebody ought to do that, and our family could keep them busy.
Speaking of New Zealand, do you remember the Dadabos? Does that name ring a bell? Marilyn and,
Barely rings a bell.
anyway, they had served a mission. They were in New Zealand for 5 years with great-grandpa and great-grandma.
Did she have red hair? Did she
Well,
have red hair?
She might have.
Because I knew a lady worked over at the temple that was down there with them during that time. That had red hair, but I don't remember what the name.
She used to work in the registry there when she worked at the temple.
Yeah, I worked in the office there.
Yeah,
That's probably her.
yeah.
Why don't,
Anyway, she found out I was with the Roy Harris line, and she had a lot of nice things to say about great-grandma too.
why don't you just start, Grandpa, with when you left? You told us last week about going down to the Navy office and they gave you a week before you had to leave. Why don't you just start there? And once you kind of get into the war, I guess we'll just go into our questions. But tell us about the training and about where you trained at and that kind of thing.
Well, I might have been able to have stayed out of the military if I'd have wanted to, because Roy and Joe and Tom were already in there. And I suppose if I'd have gone and said, you know, they need me back here, why, but I wasn't going to do that. They were in there and I was going to go in there too. So when I was about the time I turned 18 and had to register for the draft, why, they were taking guys just a few months after they turned 18, they were taking them. They weren't waiting until they were 19 or 20 or whatever, they were taking them right then. So I went down to the Navy recruiting station, and Jimmy Lindsay, whose name's on the sign company right there by Corey Buick on West Main Street, Jimmy Lindsay had gone into the Navy. He was the sign business. They had, Guerrero and Lindsay had a sign company.
LeVar works for them.
Yeah, and so he's probably, Jimmy could be dead now, I don't know. But the sign, the company still is Guerrero and Lindsay. I think every time I go by there, I ought to stop in and go see if Jimmy's still around or whatever.
You told me last week.
Well, they wanted me to tell the rest of it.
Well, you got all the way to the part where you signed up for the Navy
Yeah.
and
So
went down to the recruiting office, and then they said they'd given you a week.
Okay.
And you got to the point where you blessed Russ the night before,
Yeah.
and then you were leaving the next morning, and then we didn't, it was kind of from there on out that we didn't have.
Well, that was, yeah, and I told you that Jimmy gave me a card and said, I can't take you right now, but if they call you up, why then give them this card and come over, and that's what I did. and they gave me a week to go, and so we brought Russ and Mom home from the hospital the day I had to go catch the train that night at 9 o'clock for San Diego. So we named him, blessed him I did, and with Grandpa Harris and Grandpa Richards there helping. And then I went to the depot and off I went to San Diego. And I went over on that real fancy railroad that goes down through there, but the whole trip was at night, so I didn't see any of that. And they pulled into not Tecate, went through Tecate, but pulled into Tijuana, and they stopped the train there and they checked everybody out on there to make sure there weren't foreigners coming across the border on the train, because that train crossed the border somewhere there around Mexicali or somewhere, and stayed south of the border all the way till it came back in at Tijuana there at San Diego. And that, your dad, Ken had some information there that he brought me about that railroad that was built through there. And golly, it's a fascinating thing, but it was night, so I didn't see anything. But anyway, I got into San Diego on the train then, and they put us on a bus, because there were several guys on the train that were reporting over there like I was. Plus there were some guys that were on boot leave. They'd finished boot camp, gone home for a week or so, and were coming back, and so they of course got on that bus too. And they took us out to the Naval Training Center. And you guys have been over there, I know, and around that, on the way out to the lighthouse while you go right by it. And so, anyway, we still had on our civvies, of course, and they had us pull our shirts off, and they gave us physical exam as soon as we got there on the bus, and issued us some clothes, and eye exams and that, only the eye exams were done by corpsmen, they weren't done by doctors or optometrists or anything like that. And then we reported to Building 458. Well, no, that was our company. We're Company 458. I did remember the building number, probably would, but anyway, we reported to Camp Decatur, and put our stuff away, picked our bunks and what we wanted to do. And then the chief petty officer there had his name was Riordan, and he had a second-class petty officer who was his assistant. And so here we are, a company of men, 160 of us. We're standing out there lined up, just halfway lined up behind the barracks. And we supposedly know nothing about the military. And so he looks us over and he says, is there anyone here who's had any military experience? Now, normally you wouldn't answer when he said that, because in the Army, if you said, yeah, I have, say, fine, you can stand guard duty tonight out there. Or would send you over to the kitchen and you can help peel potatoes. But in the Navy, and I suppose the Navy would do that too, but on the train going over was this sailor that is on boot leave. And he'd just come back and gone back to the base, and he said, hey, you guys, when you get over there, they're going to ask you if you have any military experience, or if you know anything about post office, or you know anything about custodial work, and said, if you've had any experience in that way, say you do, because they don't do like the Army and put you in these dumb jobs. Said, if you've had some experience in there, the Navy will put you in that kind of a job. And I remember telling this guy, well, I had one semester of ROTC, tell him that. Raise your hand when he said any military experience. Well, okay. And so I've always been happy that I had that conversation with that guy. Because now here's Riordan up there and he's saying, all right, anybody with any military experience? Well, 3 of us raised our hands. And I was 18 years old, and this other guy was 21, I think. Bodie was 21 or 2, and Owsley was about 26 or 27, so he was an old man. And it's okay, what'd you have? And Owsley said, I served a hitch in the Army, 4 years in the Army. Okay, step up here. Then he says to Bodie, what experience have you had? And Bodie said, I was in the CCC camp. I had served, enlisted in the CCC camp. Now you know what that was. The Civilian Conservation Corps. And these were guys that the government paid them, and they wore uniforms, kind of like khaki uniforms, like the Army did. But they built the trails down into Grand Canyon, and they built a lot of that stuff out at Papago Park, the roof place areas.
It was one of the Depression work relief
To
programs
make
that
jobs for people. And the money that they got was the same as a soldier got. They got $21 a month, but half of that was sent to their family. And then they got the other 11 bucks or whatever. But they were fed and all that and housed. And so my brother Joe had gone and served in there and was assigned up at Grand Canyon and went down every other week, rode a mule down the bottom of the canyon to Phantom Ranch and checked the rain gauges. That was his job. And I don't know what he did in between times, but that was one of his jobs. And so anyway, when Bodie said that, why the chief said, step up here, because that's kind of a semi-military organization. And then he said to me, what did you have? What's your military service? And I said, I was in ROTC in high school. I didn't say one semester. I said I was in ROTC in high school. Come up here. So now he says, all right, to me, take those 6 guys right there behind you, men or whatever he called them. He didn't say guys. And line them up over there. And I want you to march them down there about to whatever, he said some marker down there. And then bring them back. March them down there and back. And so I knew how to do all that. In ROTC, I'd learned the manual of arms. I'd learned really quite much of what I did in boot camp, most of it in fact, I'd learned in ROTC. And Tom was in the Marine Corps, and Tom had come home during that semester on a brief leave, and he gave me one of his khaki uniforms, because we were supposed to buy a uniform to wear in ROTC. So Tom gave me one of his, and so that's what I used in ROTC. So anyway, I get these guys and I tell them, all right, tell them how to face, switch direction. They don't know anything. And I march them down where he told me to. And then I say, call them right. And first guy turned right, and the second guy turned left. And the others now are kind of not knowing what they're supposed to do behind him. And so I said, squad, halt. And so they stopped, and I lined them up again. And I said, now, listen to what I say, right, left, do what I say. And so I marched them down. Well, by the time I got back to in front of him, they were all in step, and they were in line. And I guess it impressed him, because the guy's going the wrong way. He knew it wasn't my fault. I'd called out the order correctly. And so he said, okay, Harris, you are in charge of these 80 men, and you'll have downstairs part of the barracks here. Bodie, you will have upstairs. You'll have 80 men in your platoon. And he said, and then Owsley was the guy's name, not Bowsley, Owsley. And he said, and Owsley, you're going to be my assistant. You'll work with me, because he had 4 years in the Army. So Owsley had a pretty good job, but so did I, because I never had to stand a watch. I never had to do any details of any kind. I got up in the morning. It was my job to see that these guys got up. It was just one big dorm, bunks down the sides, and we didn't have lockers, because all of our clothes were kept in a sea bag, so it was just hanging on the end of the bed, of the bunk, so you didn't have partition or anything. You could see every bunk in the place. You just, any position, you could see them all. And so anyway, I'd get them up, I'd get them outside, get them lined up, march them to chow, come back, then maybe he'd say, all right, take them out on the grinder and let's then teach them close order drill. And so that was my job, and I took them out and I taught them. And then sometimes we'd run, and sometimes when we were running, I'd forget that I could just run all day. But these guys, some of them smoked and they were short-winded, and we'd be running around that grinder, and this at a jog, and I'd hear these guys back there saying, Harris, stop, let us rest. I'm gonna fall down, I get a rest. And so I'd do that sooner or later, but built those guys up and got those guys in good condition. But I taught them all the manual of arms, all that stuff I taught them. And the chief never interfered with that at all. He'd just come out once in a while and look and see what we were doing. Bodie was doing the same thing with his 80 guys, and Owsley, he just was around and didn't really offer suggestions or much. But now when it came to knot tying and that, well, then they took us over to another part and they had other sailors teach that. But I went clear through boot camp on the gravy train, really, because I assigned the guys to all the details, but I never had to do any of them. Some of them had to work in the galley, some of them had to ride the garbage truck and dump the cans, some had to go out and pick up the butts on the grinder, we called it, which is just the big blacktop area where we marched. I never had to do any of that stuff. We learned, one of the problems was that we did the semaphore signal with the flags. Well, the fact that I wasn't in the ranks of the guys, I wasn't doing it. I'm just standing over at the side, and they have a regular signal when it comes to teaching this. Well, the last day when we had our mass presentation there before the admiral and all these other people, well, now I have to fall into line, in the place in the line, because there's about 10 or 15 companies there, a huge crowd, a huge bunch of men. And so here I am in the line. Now, you didn't have flags. We didn't do the code with flags in our hands. We just did it with our arms, in your hands. Well, here I am down there, and I don't know. I hadn't learned it because I'm just over here watching them teach them, and I didn't bother.
You're on a gravy train.
And so it caught up with me. Nobody did anything or said anything about it to me, but I'm just standing out there, and he's spelling out words, and they're supposed to be doing the signaling. Well, the guys were good. They were doing a good job, but I'm standing up there just going, I don't, because I'm in front of them, so I can't see. If I was back behind them, I'd imitate the guy in front of me, but I was in front. And so I'm just going like this with my arms. And I was really surprised that somebody didn't say later, the chief or somebody come to me and say, that looked pretty tacky out there, what you were doing. But otherwise, everything went great. And I have a picture of my boot company, and we're standing up in the front there, in the front row with as the officers, or petty officers of that company.
So how long did boot camp take?
What?
How long was boot camp?
6 weeks. Okay. Now we stayed in Camp Decatur for 4 weeks, and then they sent it over to Mayon for 2 weeks, and then we went to a transfer barracks, and that's where you stayed 1 day, 5 days, 2 weeks, whatever.
When was your rifle range experience?
Somewhere in there, probably the second, third week of boot camp, we went out to Camp Matthew, which is now the University of San Diego, University of California at San Diego. is built on that property. And we walked out there, and it was probably 3-4 miles, but so that wasn't any big deal. But I had these guys, and we'd march for a while, and then we'd straggle, called straggling, just tell them to fall out of formation, but to stay basically, they knew what I meant, to stay basically in the order there, but they didn't have to be in step. And we'd walk, and sometimes we'd even run. We weren't carrying anything on it, we weren't carrying rifle or anything with us. And we'd jog for half a mile. And really got these guys in shape. Got out there, and here's the Marines, and they have the rifle range set up there where the Marines are doing their firing. And this was all set up. All Navy men went out there at least once to shoot at the targets. Well, so I got there, and now once I got there, I'm not the platoon leader anymore. I'm just one of the guys, because the Marines literally took over everything there, told you what to do, when to do it, and so forth. So I just one of the guys. And so anyway, when it came my turn to shoot, we were using a 30-06.
Springfield, right?
Yeah, the old Springfield. And bolt action, 5 shells to the clip. And so the Marine sergeant, he's standing there, and one of the Marines hands me the rifle. He said, "Okay, Mac," they called everybody Mac. Said, "Start with your standing position. You're going to fire 5 shots." They'd already told the group what we're going to do, and several guys had shot, so I already knew what I was going to do. But he says, "You'll fire 5 shots in the standing position, slow fire. Then you'll fire 5 shots from the kneeling position, and then you'll fire 5 shots from the prone position. Then you'll repeat that, only it's rapid fire. You'll have to shoot all 5 of those within 5 seconds. You'll add 1 second per shot. Okay, and you'll do the 3 positions again. So we're going to fire 30 rounds. 10 standing, 1 slow, 1 fast. So, okay, so I take the rifle, put the 5 shells in it, pull the little clip out of the way, put one into the chamber, put it up to my left shoulder like this, and this Marine says, the sergeant says, "Hey, Mac, get that on your right shoulder where it belongs." And I said, "But I shoot left-handed." "Well, you don't anymore. You now shoot right-handed, so get that on your right shoulder." I said, "Okay, Sergeant, but I don't shoot as well from my right shoulder." "Well, that's what you're going to shoot as." So I fired my 5 slow shots, had 5 bullseyes. Then I got down to my knees, and I've had 4 of the 5 were bullseyes. And then I laid down, and I think all 5 were again. Now, I let these guys, you know, we all know better than this, but these guys, my shipmates are saying, "Hey, look at Harris, look at that, he had 5 bullseyes, look at Harris, look at these." Oh, and so my head starts to get like this. So now I'm doing the rapid fire, and I got a 3, I got 1 3 on there. I got a couple of 4s, and then I'm kneeling, and again a 4. I only had 1 3 on the card altogether, but mostly 4s, mostly 5s, but some 4s. And so when I got all through, the sergeant walked up there, and when he did, this Marine came over there and handed me the card, and I had 138 out of 100, possible 150. I'd have put bullseye every time, it had been 150, at 138. And this sergeant looked at it, and he said to me, "Boy, I wish we had time to see you shoot left-handed." And I said, "Well, let's do it." And he said, "I can't, but I wish I could." And so I said, "Well, I'd like to. I'd enjoy it." He couldn't do that. So anyway, that was the highest score of anybody of those 160 men there wasn't anybody else in there. I doubt if anybody met under Burdick in there. But a lot of these guys had never fired a gun before. That's the first time they'd ever fired, much less fire a rifle, a 30 caliber rifle. So anyway, that's what happened there. And then a bus took us back. We didn't walk back. But anyway, that was just one of the experiences I had there. And, but in boot camp, I learned the knots. Well, and I didn't have any trouble learning the knots because I remembered those from scouts. I could tie the bowlines and all those things anyway, so that really wasn't a problem for me. But some of the guys, we really had to drill them. And the regular guys would be teaching them out there, but when we'd get back to the barracks, why, some of them just come over and say, I forgot what they showed me how to do this. And so we spent quite a bit of time. We had these little ropes that were not even, it was a little cotton rope twisted, and they were strings around them on the end so they wouldn't fray. And we used them to hang your clothes on the clothesline. Instead of having clothespins, you tied these, because your jumper had 2 holes through on each side here. And so you used it for whatever you need to tie stuff with. Well, they were okay for tying knots. And so we'd sit there and I'd show these guys over and over and over how to tie a bowl. But I remembered all that from scouting. It was a long time after when I was up at Portsmouth, New Hampshire, and getting ready to take the Tigrone out, my new submarine, and they gave us an advanced class up there. And one of the things we had to do was be able to send and receive Morse code at least 5 words a minute. Now that didn't pass because a radio man will do 30, 35 a minute. And that's average letters of 5 letters to the word, so that's an average. And so I remembered my Morse code from scouting days. And so when we started doing that in this class up there, that really came back to me very quickly. And I remembered what all the Morse code, how many dots and dashes for each of your letters, and I learned that quickly. Well, didn't take me very long to be able to send 5 words a minute when we did it with a signal light. And it just is a light about this big around, and it has a handle that's on here. It's just a rod about as big around as my little finger. Comes down and then goes across the light, and then the same thing. So you can do it from either side. And it has shutters in there like Venetian blinds. And so when you flip it, why it closes and shuts the light off, and back again, it shows the light again. And it shows it about twice as long for a dash as it does for a dot. You do this for a dot, and you do this for a dash. So I didn't have any trouble with that. I picked that back up real quick. So my scouting days, I don't know if you even do signaling and scouting anymore.
No.
But that was a good thing. I was glad I learned that.
I didn't know you were in scouting. Were you?
I was a Star Scout. I got up to Star.
And then you have your shirt that says how proud you are of all your Eagle Scouts.
That's right. I'm proud of my Eagle Scouts.
Yeah, good shirts that said we're proud of Navy man. What was your rank in the Navy?
And were you proud of your grandfather,
We're the
all
proud
your grandfathers who were Star Scouts?
We're the proud grandsons of, what was your rank in the Navy?
Well, I went in as a seaman apprentice, and then seaman second, and then seaman first, and then petty officer 3rd class. And if I'd have stayed a little longer, I was taking all the tests and everything for petty officer 2nd class. But then I said, well, I'm going home. The war's over, and I'm leaving to go home. So I didn't. They said, if you'll stay and go around, the Proteus was a subtender that I was on while I was in Japan. We're going to go back to the States and go around to back up to New London, Connecticut, and we have an opening, and we're going to switch you to gunner's mate, but gunner's mate 2nd class instead of torpedo. And they're both, you learn a lot of the same things in those two ladies. And I said, no, I'm going to the West Coast because I'm going home. And besides, I'm not staying in the Navy. I'm getting out just as quick as they'll let me out, so I don't care what my rating is. If I was going to stay in here, I'd care, but I don't care. I'm getting out. And so anyway, that's what I did. I just, instead of going around the coast with the Proteus, I took the Proteus. We went to Guam. 1st of November, we left Japan, 45. Went to Guam, picked up some supplies, went to Pearl Harbor, and I got off of there, and as did a whole bunch of other guys. And we got aboard the USS Nevada, battleship Nevada. They were using it as a transport. So here we were on the Nevada coming to the West Coast.
Now you're getting ahead though, because now you're at the end of the war. You go back to boot camp. So.
Okay.
Was that where you saw the planes hit each other, the
Yeah,
P-38s?
that's right. That was an interesting experience. We were lined up, what were we doing, payday or to get a shot or something, I don't remember what it was. But we were lined up out on the grinder, out in the open, and the building that we would go into as soon as they called our group was right there, a barracks type building. And so here we are standing out there, and these two P-38s, can you tell when it's running out?
I'm still going.
There were two P-38s flying around up over our head there, over the Naval Training Base there. And we were looking up, watching them, and all of a sudden one of them was higher than the other one. He turned to dive like this, not knowing that this other plane was right under him. And one of his wings hit one of the wings on the P-38 and broke it right off. He hit it apparently with the sharp edge. It was hitting the flat edge of the wing of the one under him with the sharp edge of his wing. And broke that wing right off, right over to the engine. So he still had the two engines on there, but the wing, the rest of that wing was broken off. And here it came just fluttering right over to the engine. So he still had the two engines on there, but the wing, the rest of that wing was broken off. And here it came just fluttering. It was so funny, like a leaf. And the plane went into a circle. He couldn't control it. And so it starts going this way. Now they're up there quite a ways. The other plane, the one that hit him, it bent his wing up. So it was up just like this, out on the end. Didn't break off, but it bent it way up here. Well, he could still control that plane somewhat, but not a lot. So he heads out to the sea, out across North Island, to go out into the bay or beyond the bay. The other guy, he has to bail out because his plane is just going in a circle and there's no way to stop it. So he bails out. Now we're standing out there watching all this. And this wing is coming down, and if we'd had any sense, we'd have got out of the way because it could have been hit by, we didn't know what else was falling that was smaller that you wouldn't see. Anyway, he jumped out, and he went down a ways below the plane and opened his parachute. He did everything right, except that plane kept going around, and when it got down to where he was, the other wing caught on his shrouds, his parachute shrouds, and cut some of them, cut them in two, broke them in two. But part of the wing also hit this pilot in the head. Now we couldn't tell that. We just saw it hit, and the pilot just went swinging like this, and the parachute then came really down fast. It just was coming down twice as fast as it had been. So we knew the guy was hurt, and that the parachute had been partially disabled. We'd watched it, and he came down, and the plane hit right across the road from the training center. We could see it all, just I was over there probably a quarter mile away. and hit in a vacant place right between two houses. There were some big homes built right along across the street from the training center. Rosecrans, I think, was the name of that street. And there was big homes, but there was a vacant lot, probably 100 feet wide or so. And that plane came down and hit right in that vacant lot and just burst into flames. Well, then we could hear the fire trucks coming, and
Did they bring the pilot down with it?
the pilot, it hit him,
But it didn't.
but then he just fell free on his own. He lit up over the hill from the base. Rosecrans, it slopes up right there. It goes up to some pretty high hills up there, probably as high as Camelback Mountain and almost. And he hit back over on the backside of that. We figured he had to get it killed him when he hit the ground if he wasn't already dead. Later we found out that it had killed him, that it hit him in the head. That wing had hit him in the head and killed him. So he was just falling limp down there. The other guy got his plane out over the water out there and bailed out. And it was going down and it crashed, and we couldn't see it crash because North Island was between us and there. But we saw him jump out. And we saw a boat head out to go get him, and motorboat headed out to pick him up. But that was kind of an unusual experience to just stand there and watch that whole thing in front of you. See them collide, see the one bail out, and the guys are up down there cheering for him because they see the plane coming down towards him, and then it hit him, and that was all the war for him. And I don't know what they did to the other guy, because the other guy was the one that was responsible for the accident. He's the one that turned down and hit the other plane under him. And so it was his fault what happened there. Anyway, I got a sample, which I saw plenty more of that as the war proceeded, when I got out and watched these planes that the Japanese had shot full of holes, and they're coming down, landing in the sea, and the guys bailing out of some of them, but mostly they can keep control, and they're what they call ditching them, landing them on the water, and then get out of there as fast as they can, because those planes didn't stay afloat very long.
Well, what would be the advantage of doing that as opposed to just bailing out?
They what?
What would be the advantage of ditching it as opposed to just bailing out of the airplane?
Well,
Could you
you're
still
always
salvage
taking the chance when you bail out as to where you're gonna go. You can't all bail out at once, so you can be strung out there over 2 or 3 miles. And remember, we're right off the coast of Japan. The planes, we saw lots of Japanese planes up there, and we had to dive many times because one of them had hit towards us, or one or more of them. So, but no, the procedure was, if you could ditch the plane, to ditch it, and then you could take out your life raft. And on a B-29, it's interesting that of the 4 of those planes that we ended up with their crews, 2 of them we picked up, and the other 2 were transferred to us from another submarine. After we had all these guys that we could handle, we took them into Iwo Jima, headed for Iwo Jima, and unloaded them, and then came back out, and then met another submarine that, well, then we were out there and picked up some more men, and then we were getting ready to go back home to Guam. So one of these other submarines gave us a couple of B-29 crews that they picked up to take on back so they could stay out there. Where is it?
Grandma's got the phone.
Oh.
She got it.
So anyway, that's, I saw lots of those planes go down, and they'd call us on the radio and tell us that, and it's a voice radio that only carries about 10 miles. So the Japanese wouldn't be able to hear it if you were more than 10 miles off the coast. Well, then they're not going to hear it. So they'd call us and tell us their position, and tell us that they were going down because they'd lost 2 engines or whatever. And so then we tell them our position and that we'll meet them at such and such a place, if they can get down such and such a quadrant, because we had our charts and they had everything marked off. And they had the same charts. And so we generally got over there about the time they landed. But sometimes they'd already landed and were in the water, and the plane was already sunk. Because the B-29s, I think every one of those 4 B-29s, when it hit the water, broke in two, right back where the doors were in the, back towards the, well, it was behind the middle, it was farther back in the middle, but it was back in the plane. The plane broke right in two there. And the tail section, when that happened, the back section just scooped water. So if anybody was back in there, they'd have it, because there wouldn't be any way they could get out. That water pressure, scooping that water away, just pin them back in there and take them down. And as a matter of fact, I think out of those 4 crews, we only had one tail gunner that survived. Out of the 4 tail gunners on those 4 planes, only one of them survived. And that was because he got out of the tail and came up forward. So he was in front of the door when it broke in two, and so he was up with the rest of the crew. One was killed. They knew he was dead back in there before they landed, so when they waited to get him out. And another one was alive, but he insisted on staying back there. And he died. And I don't remember what happened to the other one, but we only ended up with one tail gunner out of those 4 crews. But otherwise, the crew members all got out. We didn't lose anybody but tail gunners. The others all belly landed, they're ditched and got out there. Now these were all Army Air Corps guys, and they were really a congenial bunch of men. Several of them were officers, because both pilots would be an officer. The engineer they had was an officer. The bombardier
Navigator
would be an officer, and your navigator would be an officer. So you had a lot of officers in the crew of a B-29. But those guys, when we got them aboard, they went in the engine room and helped those guys work. They were in the galley helping the mess cooks set up the tables, wash the dishes. They were just always real eager to work. But we picked up one crew of Navy guys, and there was, I think, 5 of them in that, what kind of plane was that? It was
Ventura.
Ventura, yeah. And they thought they were on vacation. They just wanted to sit around and drink coffee and visit and play cards and eat when it was time to eat, and they didn't volunteer to help anybody with anything. And some of us guys would say, well, they throw those guys back. They're a pain in the neck on here. Throw them back. but the Army guys were just much better. They were a good bunch.
Now after basic, then, or when you finish with basic story, then you have to go back to the sub school, back to Chicago.
When I finished boot camp, in boot camp they gave us what they called a GCT test, General Classification Test. Well, GCT meant General Classification Test. And all sailors took the GCT test. And it was just a general test, kind of things that you basically learn in high school. And so anyway, when they called me in one day, I was probably in my 4th or 5th week of boot camp when they called us in one at a time, and the guy says, here's what you did on the GCT, and this is your best, strongest area, and this. And then he said, you are supposed to take another test called the Eddy test. And that'll be given in about a week, and you'll be notified when and where to go to take that. And I said, okay. I didn't question the GCT. Why should I question the Eddy test? And so, in a week, I'd go to where we're supposed to take that. Well, now, instead of hundreds of guys in there like there was in the GCT, because it wasn't just our company, it was several other companies. Now I'm in here and there's only probably 100 guys, or maybe less than that, wasn't very many. And so they pass out this test to us. Now the test is about radios, transformers, resistors, rheostats, stuff like this. Well, I had taken a semester of radio in high school, and we had made what they called a little super heterodyne set, and it was in a cigar box. And it took, you didn't have to have anything in there because you had an antenna on the thing, and you had headphones, and you could pick up all the radio stations around it.
Crystal radio.
Yeah, and there were only probably 5 or 6 radio stations in the valley at that time, so you could pick them up. And we made one of those little sets, and I had that for years after I came back from the war. I still had that little cigar box set. And I'd take it to the fire station with me and lay in bed there with a headset and listen to the radio. But anyway, that test was easy for me. That Eddie test was easy because I knew all those things. What are the markings, the stripings on resistors? Well, yellow means this and red means this. And I knew all that from that class. I just had that class less than a year before. And so, okay, I did well on this. But what I didn't know was what was going to happen to me as a result of that. So now it's in like the 5th week, and they call me in along with other guys, one at a time, but I mean, don't just call me out of the company. And the guy says, we've gone over all your tests and everything, and you're being sent to radio tech school. And I said, what is radio tech school? Well, they're the guys who repair the radios and the radar. They're the guys that keep that equipment up. And I said, well, how long is that going to take? Well, that's an 11-month school. I said, I didn't come in the Navy to go to school for 11 months. I came in here to get on a submarine. Well, you're not qualified to be on a submarine. Why not? Well, first place, you're too tall. And in the second place, you have 15-20 vision out of your right eye. And I said, that's not true. I have 20-20 in both eyes. No, your record shows 15-20. I said, that corpsman that gave me that eye test says, put your hand over your left eye. Read that. Okay, now over your right eye. Read that. Okay. I said, that wasn't any eye test. I said, I have 20-20 vision. And he said, well, I'm sorry, but that's what the record shows. And I said, well, I'm not going to radio tech school for 11 months. I want to go to submarines. What are my other choices? And he said, armed guard. And I said, now what is an armed guard? And he said, those are the 6 or 8 Navy guys who ride on a merchant ship and man the guns when they're attacked by submarine or whatever. And all I could see in my head was ammunition ships that I'm on there, or tankers.
Things that blow up.
Yeah, that one torpedo or one bullet maybe blows the thing sky high. And so I said, no, I'm not going to armed guard. Well, then you go to radio tech, because that's the only choices. So I said, well, okay, but that isn't what I want to do. I came in the Navy to go to submarines, and if I knew I couldn't have done that, I wouldn't even have come in the Navy. I'd have gone in the Air Force. And so when 6 weeks is up, we moved over to the transfer barracks. Now I'm just one of the guys, because my company's been dissolved and the guys are scattered, and so I'm not a platoon leader anymore, I'm just one of the guys. Well, anyway, I was over there about a week, and we got our orders till we'd board the train, we'd go to Chicago. And it took 5 days to get to Chicago on a train, 5 days. It took 1 day to get across Texas. We were in El Paso, Texas at midnight, and at midnight the next night, we were in Fort Worth. And we weren't all the way across Texas land, but we were in Fort Worth. That's how slow those troop trains moved. And so we get up to Chicago, and Navy had taken over Wright Junior College, which was out at 3400 North Austin Street. That's funny, I can remember these addresses and things. And in the northwest part of Chicago. And they'd taken over this junior college completely, and so they had bunks all over the gymnasium area was our bunking area. Bunks 4 or 5 high. And there were 1,000 people there. We had a bunch of Marines that were there also who were in that training program. And so the first day they had us go in the auditorium, and here's this Navy officer up there sitting on the stand. And when they introduced him as Commander Eddie, and that was the Eddie test that I was taking, I thought, well, now this guy had something to do with that. So he gets up, and when he stands up, he looks like Wilt Chamberlain. He looked like he's about 6'6". He's just a really big guy, tall guy. And I was sitting up near the front, and I could see that he had on a pair of dolphin pin, which is the submariner's pin. And my head's going, I'm too tall. I'm 6 feet and 1 inch, and I'm too tall. And here's a guy wearing a submarine pin that's at least 6 feet 6. They lied to me about that. And so anyway, when he talked, and then we started our classes a day or so later, and we ate in the cafeterias. They had a kitchen, cafeteria, everything there, so it was an ideal place for us. Anyway, while we're in Chicago, you could ride the buses and the streetcars for free. The servicemen could. They just asked that you please not ride between 6 and 8 o'clock in the morning, or between 4 and 6 o'clock in the evening, because they had so many passengers on there that just. However, if you went and got on, they still didn't charge you, but they did ask us not to do that. So everywhere we went was free. You just get on the streetcar, get on the bus, and ride. You didn't have to pay. And everywhere you went, somebody had food out there for you. There's a USO or was something there where you just went in and they fed you. So we'd go to church Sunday morning. I was only there 3 Sundays, but went to church Sunday morning, and we would get on the bus, ride over halfway to church, and Mike was at this Logan Square ward when he was back there on his mission. They only had 3 wards in Chicago at that time. There's a city of 4 million. They only had 3 wards. Logan Square ward, University ward, and they were still there when Mike was there. And then they had the Edgewater Beach ward, which was held in the Edgewater Beach Hotel right there on fronted on Lake Michigan. And they just used the ballroom and some of that area to hold the meetings on Sunday. Whereas the other 2 wards had church buildings. Well, we'd ride over and we'd ride the bus over to Belmont, Cragen area, get off and get on the streetcar. Then we'd get off there and walk over to the USO, and they'd have, I don't know where they got all this good food, but they'd have pancakes for us and the USO people, and bacon and eggs and all this good stuff for breakfast. And we'd eat our breakfast there, and then we'd get back on the streetcar and ride on down to where the church was, Logan Square Ward. And one time, we went into the Edgewater Beach ward, again, just riding the streetcars in there for free, attended that building. But anyway, it's about the second week of classes there that I decided I was going to talk to one of these instructors I had, because he seemed like a congenial guy. He was a civilian, he wasn't a Navy man. And so I stayed after class, and I told him, I really feel bad about this, because I came in the Navy to go to submarines, and they put me in this program. And I want to go to sub school at New London. That's what I want to do. And I told him, you know, a few things about how I decided to go to subs and that. And so he said, why don't you go down to the office and ask to see Lieutenant so-and-so and tell him what you just told me. And so I said, well, will he talk to me? Because, you know, I'm a seaman second class. I don't know if this lieutenant didn't want to talk to me. He said, yeah, he'll talk to you. He's a nice guy. Just go down there and tell him what you told me. So I go down to the office, and I go in and ask for an appointment to see him and tell him that my instructor had sent me. And so he called me in, and I told him what I'd told the instructor. And so he said, sounds to me like you really ought to be in submarines. You really want to go there bad. And I said, I do. I don't want to go through this school. And so he said to me, all right, I'm going to make an appointment for you to see Commander Eddie. Now, this is the big 6'6" guy that made the test stuff that we took in boot camp. I'm going to send you down to see Commander Eddie. His office is on the 13th floor of the building at 140 North State Street. And so I'll send you down there to see him. I'll make the appointment for you. So then the next day I get word that the appointment's made and that I'm to go the following morning, and of course ride the streetcar down there and go up and see him. So I went down there. Now here's this little old, and it's winter. Well, I had my pea coat on and my black sweater and everything else because Chicago was just cold as a witch's heart there. And so I got down there and went up to the 13th floor, and the girl, and I was early. I was about 30, 40 minutes early. And so the girl said, well, there's a television station right down on the next floor. Why don't you go down there while you're waiting? And have you ever seen a television? I said, what's television? I don't even know what you're talking about. And so she said, well, just go down there and look and you'll see. So I went down, and here's these huge cameras. I mean, they're sitting on these rollers, and the camera looks big as a car. No, but they weren't doing any show at that time, because television at that point, they only ran this station like 2 hours a day. That's all they'd have it on there, because nobody had a TV set. Very few did. And so anyway, I looked around, and I asked some questions of the girl that was there, and so I found out what television was. That's the first time I knew anything about television. So now, I went back up to the office, and she sent me in to see Commander Eddie. And so I told him what they told me in boot camp, that I was too tall, and I said, you're 5, 6 inches taller than I am. And I said, and I came in the Navy to be in submarines. That's the only thing I wanted to do. I wouldn't even have come in the Navy if it hadn't been for that. And so we sat there for 30 minutes. He was talking to me just like I'm talking to you. He wasn't expecting me to say sir or anything of the sort. We're just talking. And so he asked me a number of questions. And I told him that I think I learned to swim before I learned to walk. Because I could swim. I can't even remember when I couldn't swim. And I told him about growing up on the farm and having the well that we dug, 3-foot well, because he said there's a body you to be in tight places. And I said, no. I said, we told him about this well that was 45 feet deep and only 3 feet in diameter. And Brother would lower me down there on the windlass. I'd put a 5-gallon paint bucket we had hooked on there, is what we were gonna put the sand and rocks in to pull it up as we're digging deeper. And he'd lower me down, and I'd have one foot in the bucket and the other foot just out in the air and holding onto the rope. And I told him about that, and he said, and that didn't bother you at all to be down there? No, not a bit. When it was my turn to dig, fine. I said, besides, it's cool down there. Well, then he asked me about my swimming, and I told him about how I used to like to tease the parents by getting on the upstream side of the culvert, and they'd watch and they'd be saying, don't go through that culvert, that's dangerous. And I'd say, oh, it's not that dangerous. And I'd just con them, and I was doing that when I was 10 or 11 years old, and I'd dive in there. Well, they'd run over to the other side to see me come out, only when I went through, I'd stay clear of the bottom, and I'd swim right along the bottom, and they couldn't see me down in there. And I'd swim over to the side of the swimming hole then, and there was this bush that grew out over there, and I'd swim in under that, and then I'd come up. And then I could see them out through the bush, but they didn't have any idea that I was in there. And they'd be running back and forth across the street. Well, he's not over here, he went in. Well, he hadn't come out this end, he must be stuck in there. And I'm over there just trying to keep them laughing out loud. And I'd stay in there about 5 minutes until these people would say, well, what's going to happen to him? And then I'd just go underwater, I'd swim out into the middle, and then I'd come up out of the water like a porpoise. Wow! Boy, that's hard to hold your breath.